to another Just 5 Mins. Goodness me. Yes, along with the shorter intro, which if I don't keep rambling, it will actually make sense to have one of those shorter intros. Anyway, the FOMO monster returns. So I'm sure you're familiar with it, but FOMO meaning fear of missing out. And yeah, it's a heavily Microsoft based one. So if you really hate Microsoft, it's probably best to switch off. But otherwise, of course, this is a lot of stuff from the .NET Conf 2023. I almost thought we were in 2024, but we're not. Right. Okay. This, I've got a limited amount of time because it is meant to be just 5 minutes. Good stuff. Is the overview. Okay. Lots of performance improvements in .NET 8, which has been released. That's the very latest version. Oh, crikey, where to start? There's a couple of things, well, 3 things ye shall know, which I've already used, so I can't use that again. But yeah, we've got full stack web apps and APIs, which we've had for a while. But I guess the maturity of Blazor, I suppose, and the fact that it's now got some clever sort of like static server rendering, and it can automatically switch from server rendering to using WebAssembly. And if you don't know what WebAssembly is, I did a previous episode on that. Maybe we should revisit that at some stage. But anyway, there's a lot of good stuff. There really is. If you're obviously a .NET person, it's cross-platform. Most of this stuff is, if not all of it, but certainly most of it is true cross-platform on Mac or Linux, whichever way. I can still not get that. But anyway, there's been some good stuff because it's been also to do with the new version of Visual Studio. So things like there's an endpoints explorer tool now when you creating all your API sort of apps, basically, so you can browse that a little bit easier. You can generate requests for endpoints. So where I would normally go to Postman, and still will for a lot of things, to be honest, to test an endpoint, you can actually do requests, and it's got a nice, clever sort of embedded IDE that you can generate those requests and actually run those API endpoints all within Visual Studio. One thing I do have to do is have a look at JetBrains Rider, actually, which has been out for a while. I think I looked at it, but I don't know. I know there's a subscription to it. It's not much, but I haven't quite got around to that. So maybe we'll have a look at that at some point. But anyway, lots of good stuff. There's, all the Blazor stuff that I mentioned, server-side rendering, static server rendering now that it's got as well. There's lots of stuff around Blazor, which I'm not really going to get into because maybe we can revisit this a little later. But there are, that was one thing I had to say on the Blazor side. Yeah, there's no WebSockets required for streaming rendering anymore. There you go. That's an interesting thing to look at in itself. Also, Maui, the cross-platform framework for creating like whether it's a mobile app on iOS or Android, or a Mac app, a native Mac OS app, or a Windows app. That's Maui, basically, and that's really come on leaps and bounds. It's got the integration with the dev kit extensions in VS Code now. So if you don't want to use Visual Studio, you can use VS Code. And I think I've got a reason why they've done that as well, is because they've really sort of dropped support for Visual Studio on a Mac. It was actually, in my opinion, it was actually looking okay, but it, yeah, unfortunately didn't look like it was going anywhere. So it looks like they've sort of canned it, or at least dropping that from the Mac version. I think it was just too difficult to keep up with the Windows version, perhaps. So you can do, obviously VS Code is cross-platform in itself, and with the dev kit extensions you can do some really good stuff now. Okay, now I'm conscious that I've already hit 5 minutes. But the two things that I've got a summary of all of this, by the way, and a link to the original video. But what I wanted to quickly say is, yeah, some of the AI stuff. Absolutely crazy. The semantic, the Microsoft Semantic SDK, that you got to look at, you know. But again, if you haven't got the FOMO or FOMO-itis that I have, then you maybe don't. But that is really quite incredible. How you can have multi-model, because it's not just around OpenAI or Azure OpenAI. It uses Hugging Face and a few other systems out there for the multi-model approach. But yeah, we're going to have to revisit that one on its own. So that is great, but also cloud native and building resilient applications. This is one that really jumped out because it's essentially, I'm just having a look actually. I've forgotten what it's Aspire, of course. Okay, so way back, actually not that long ago, but long enough. David Fowler from Microsoft and a team created something called Project Tie that uh, aimed to basically tie together a lot of, like, especially microservices and things like that, and a better way to actually not only run that stuff locally, but how you can actually interact with that. Now, I haven't actually dug into it enough yet because it's literally only just been released. It was quite a sideways thing. Nobody really knew about it, apparently. But I'm looking at things like Dapper, DAPR, not DAPPER, which is the ORM from the Stack Overflow guys. But Dapper, DAPR, which is all built around for, scalable apps with microservices and goodness knows what. So I just wonder where Aspire fits into that mesh, if you like. But Aspire definitely gives you a lot of really cool stuff to be able to run lots of little microservices, but not have to worry about wiring them all up and all that sort of stuff. Again, these are all going to have to be just 5 mins on their own, I think, but as an overview. And the only other thing was the AOT compilation, which looks really cool. It's been dotted around for a year or two at least. So, they did an example where they've got a fairly large app that essentially compiled down, like normally compiled down to about 100 meg or something. But then with the AOT ahead of time compilation, which basically shakes everything out, that it doesn't need. So you can publish a one-click publish file with your app, all the .NET framework and everything, and that 100 meg application turned into something like 22 meg. So that's very clever. And I've got a feeling that Rust actually might do something like this as well. I'll have to have a chat to my good friend Tim Abel, actually, just to see how that compares. I'm sure it must be, because let's face it, everybody borrows everything from everybody else, don't they? But anyway, I really should have called this episode just 10 minutes because that's where we're almost at. It's a ramble. There's a lot of info. I'll put the summary and the link to the video. But as I say, I'm going to break apart a few of those new sort of features, certainly around the Maui, which for the mobile and multi-platform development, Blazor quite possibly as well, and certainly this AOT, the AI, the semantic SDK, and of course, the Aspire framework that's there as well. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there, but as I say, I probably should have called this one just 10 minutes, but rambling over. Hope you're all well, and we will catch you on the next one.